Hi gang, on the Joy of Football podcast this week, Martin and I are we need to talk about whether Premier League clubs are struggling at the elite level of the game, no one in the Champions League final, and whether or not Arsenal are struggling.
We've got three of the best, and from Neil's recent trip to Newcastle, you'll detect that he was quite taken with Newcastle United.
Letter from the Gantry is also from Newcastle to Chelsea, but this is a trip on the team coach for Martin Tyne.
A voice of passion with Neil in full cry, I have to say.
Yep. And stoppage time, we're looking at Inter Milan, at Paris Saint-Germain, at Barcelona, and Martin's looking at
VAR.
The Joy of Football podcast. With me, Neil Barnett.
And with me, Martin Tyler.
Looks for Xavi! Rooney! Aguero!
The Joy of Football. Hello, the Joy of Football podcast with Martin Tyler, the greatest commentator in the world, and me, Neil Barnett, is coming to that stage of the season where we know who the cup finals are between. We know who the champions are likely or even are across Europe, and we can start talking about how the seasons have gone. Let's get on with it. We will start with a segment called We Need to Talk About. And Martin, we need to talk about the fact that elite Premier League superiority has fallen away in the Champions League, and now it's more the belly of the Premier which is superior to other European countries. And if I look at this, this is my evidence. I'm going back to 2018 in the Champions League. 2018 Liverpool were runners-up. 2019 Liverpool won it against Tottenham runners-up. 2021 Chelsea won it against Manchester City runners-up. 22 Liverpool runners-up again. 23 Manchester City won it. In 2024 last season, no semi-finalists. Manchester United and Newcastle were both bottom of their groups, went out before New Year. Arsenal and Manchester City simply got to the quarter-finals. This season, Arsenal did get to the semi-finals, but Manchester City failed in the qualifying knockout round, a new round. Liverpool only got to the round of 16, and Aston Villa to the quarter-finals. Yet, the Europa League, with the two teams above the relegation zone, Tottenham and Manchester United are the finalists, and in the conference, the one English entrant, Chelsea, are in the final. What's gone wrong at the elite level? Has something gone wrong?
I don't think so, Neil. I've been weighing up your argument. We've talked about it for a few days now. I've just watched the highlights of Manchester United beating Athletic Bilbao 7-1 on aggregate.
Who
are fourth
in Spain and heading for the
Champions
Champions
and above
League.
them, Atletico Madrid, no final. Real Madrid, no final. Barcelona, close, but no final. So you could say the same thing about them. I think we've been distracted by the fact that the teams in the middle of the table have been surprising and exciting. And the league has been dominated by Liverpool, who have had their failures in their big cup games, really, which is a bit surprising,
Plymouth
but
away.
can happen.
I enjoyed that.
But they have absolutely dominated. They're an elite Premier League team. I would personally put it down to the fact that these seasons happen. Look at Liverpool finalists, Liverpool champions, Chelsea champions, Liverpool runners-up, Manchester City champions. I mean, it's only been a couple of years. If it's the same next year, I think I'd agree with you. But I do think that I'm not looking at teams doing fantastically in other countries. I mean, yeah, Inter have got to a final, so Italy have got a representative, and two Europa League finalists are ours. One of the conference is ours. And we're a Betis 6, so you're playing the sixth place team. Your sixth place is fifth, sixth in England. We'll see what happens with that. But it's been pretty easy. I've actually, these results have happened, and you're factually right, but I've just been disappointed in the quality throughout Europe, really, in terms of truly elite football. Wonderful semi-final Barcelona and PSG, wonderful. And PSG probably are the team that we should be talking about, whether they'll win it or not. And Barcelona, of course, have just beaten Real Madrid again. So they look like the two teams that deserve to be top this season. But I don't think that's
Inter
an
Milan,
indicator.
obviously.
Yes.
But I just feel that Barcelona and Inter Milan especially, but Paris Saint-Germain, three teams, have got the tempo, have got the intensity that Liverpool have lost during the season, which I did say early on I thought might happen with their style of play. Now, Arne Slot's changed the Jurgen Klopp style. It happened more under Klopp, but it has happened again under Liverpool to a great extent.
I mean, they won it with times. How many points clear at the top? Are they 15 or something like that?
Well, yeah, they are. This is true. But if you look at the history of the Premier League, before this century, only two clubs or two occasions had the champions got more than 90 points, which was one club, Manchester United, in 93-94 when they won the league for the first time since 1967. And United again, it was only half this last century. 99-2000, they got 91 points. But since
so what are you saying about
overall,
getting the most
13
points?
clubs, or there have been 13 occasions where clubs have got over 90 points. So 11 times this century, if you don't include United's 2000. 11 times. Liverpool aren't going to make it. So in a year in which the pursuing clubs haven't done very well, in terms of history, neither have Liverpool.
I think you're tilted by the fact that there have been superior teams, Manchester City in particular, Liverpool with their own title-winning season before this one. I mean, the first Premier League season was won with 84 points by Manchester United, playing 42 games, not 38 games. So 84, they were lauded with that. 93-94, they got 92, 42 games. Blackburn won it with less than 90 with 42 games the following year. Man United won it with 75 points in the mid-1990s. I think it's much better for the league if it's a lower points total. And the reason it's been a high points total is the teams at the bottom have increasingly struggled to get a points tally that makes the whole thing squeezed up a bit more.
Do you think, though, that there is a loss of tempo? Manchester United, of course, are probably the worst victims of it. I think Arsenal suffered from it with their injuries. Their tempo seemed to go down. My club haven't lost tempo so much as stopped, and it's but there are a number of clubs where the tempo just hasn't been there, and what seems to have happened is that PSG, Barcelona, and Inter Milan seem to have got Premier League tempo.
I agree with that.
And Real Madrid have gone into reverse. And
but
that's why they've struggled.
Listen, we don't want to be lauding the same teams. We're neutrals, we're media, we're pretty typical British football fans where we want to see change and different challenges and different styles of play. Newcastle United play with a terrific tempo, and they're rightly, you've just seen them play with terrific tempo. The teams...
And it hurt.
Yeah, the teams like you're looking at Bournemouth play with tempo, Crystal Palace play with tempo. Maybe not all the time. Nottingham Forest, when they get the ball, the tempo is there. Of course, there's other facets to it. What you do without the ball is the most important thing, probably. So I agree that there are seeds of doubt in where the tempo is going, and we're getting onto our own hobby horse about philosophies. And I saw a game recently where the team was losing and the manager didn't change the shape of the team at all, and they lost the game. And I find that hard to take, really. I think there should be scope for desperation football, if you like, fighting football. I know that sounds very old school, but if you need to get a point by just whacking the ball in the box and everybody jumping for it and getting maybe a softer goal out of old-fashioned football, why not? If the modern methods aren't working, but we have to respect the coaches who are. I mean, you can't argue with Pep Guardiola. And yet the football at times is a bit one-paced.
They've lost tempo more than anyone.
Well, I'm not sure how much. Their tempo was slow, quick. We've beaten you. That's how it works at Manchester City. And now they're playing the build-up play at the same tempo, but they've not got that quite injection of genius really that they've had with players down the years, down their dominating years. But it is just one season we're talking about.
Well, it's two. It's two. With the Premier League not doing well in the Champions League.
2 years when 5 finals in a row. I mean, you go back to periods in time when in the 70s and late 70s and 80s when Villa won it and Liverpool were in there or thereabouts all the time.
Nottingham Forest.
And Nottingham Forest won it twice. So these periods happen. I'm not really concerned about it. Arsenal put up a brave fight, I thought. Villa could have knocked PSG out. There's absolutely no question about that. So that's Villa, who, are going to perhaps finish 6th or 7th, So I don't worry about it. Europe is a cup competition. I know they're trying to make it different, and I quite enjoyed. I don't know, it's another subject for another day, but I quite enjoyed the 8 games against 8 different sides. I know you don't, but I quite enjoyed it, and I thought it was a good challenge for the teams. And then when it came to the knockout stuff, we've had some fabulous games in which the English clubs have come close, but no cigar.
Well, they need to have a good season next season,
Yeah.
or people will be looking. Which brings us on to Arsenal. There's a lot of criticism in the media about Mikel Arteta. We need to talk about Arsenal because they've obviously fallen back in the league. They were much closer to the champions in the last 2 years, but they have made a significant amount of progress in Europe to get to the semi-final. So let's give you a quick rundown of the Arteta years at Arsenal. He took over in late 2019 going into 2020. They came 8th in the league, went out of the Europa Cup in the round of 32, won the FA Cup, the last thing they've won other than the Community Shield, and they'd already gone out of the League Cup in the 4th round. The following season, 2021, 8th again, they reached a Europa League semi-final and went out in the 4th round of the FA Cup and the semi-finals of the League Cup. So in 2021-22, there was no Europe. They came 5th in the league, progress. FA Cup 3rd round, League Cup semi-final. 22-23, they really made a go of it. 2nd in the league, round of 16 in the Europa, 4th and 3rd rounds in the FA Cup and League Cup. Last season, 2nd in the league and very close to pushing for the title. Quarterfinals of the Champions League, FA Cup 3rd round, League Cup 4th round. And now struggling to hold on to 2nd in the league. But the Champions League semi-final and really terrific games. FA Cup 3rd round, went out in the League Cup semi-final. Does Arteta need to win something urgently, or the regress in the league this season, can we say, has been balanced by progress in the Champions League?
Yeah, I think the FA Cup should be put into a bit of context. They were at home, but they played Liverpool 2 years, the season before this one, and Manchester United this one. So if we'd have said Liverpool had gone out in the 3rd round of the FA Cup, I mean, it was one or the other, wasn't it? And they've come up short in those games. Semi-final of the Carabao Cup, I thought they came up short in that, where they looked like they would be
Against Newcastle.
against the winners, of course, of the but I thought that.
Who Liverpool then came up short against in the final.
Well, that's what the point I'm making. That's football. Yeah. And I understand that there is a sort of 2 sides to this particular argument. I think Arsenal as a club are still benefiting from what Arteta did early on in coming in, recognising what he had to do to change the dressing room, to change the players. Now, and of course, winning the FA Cup was a massive bonus to do that at the same time. I think that feel-good factor is still there, but I do see the argument that improvement should be second. I think many of us thought that they would win the league this year.
I did, yeah.
Yeah, and it hasn't happened. But it looks like, I feel for the players. The managers are obviously, they're always going to be the spotlight. The players are asked to do it week in, week out. And I look at Martin Odegaard is a fantastic player, But I don't think in the last few weeks he's looked like the burden of leadership, maybe the stress of playing. He's had an injury earlier in the season, but I'm not picking on him particularly. But I do think that there are players who have not quite been able to sustain it. And that we ask so much. We ask for perfection every week. We ask everybody to win, and of course they can't all win. I think Arsenal would be foolish to get rid of Arteta. I do think he's still bringing the right kind of vibes to it. The only thing I can say is if the players are hearing the same thing over and over again, that they're finding it hard to respond to it. And that's nothing against the manager. That's just what happens. You know, if you're taught by the same school teacher at year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5, you're not going to take it in like you would if you had different teachers. So my personal feeling would be that, you know, it's another big season. This, he needs to win something, is a phrase I think should be written out of the football vocabulary. I think it's garbage. He needs to win. He needs to improve the club. They need to play good football. They need to make sure that those who are paying a lot of money for the season tickets get entertained with their home football. I mean, you know, you look at Arteta and he's being queried. I mean, the recent results in the league of Tottenham and Manchester United, I mean, you know, he's miles ahead of that. And he should be, maybe because he's had longer than the two managers we're talking about. Those two clubs have, Andrew's had just the second season now, and Amorim's had just a few months. So I think there are a lot more problems than worrying about what Arsenal should be doing or shouldn't be doing. I think they're a fine football club. I think he upholds the value of it. He's not perfect. Some would say his dugout behaviour I think he's worked hard at it. Now, whether he was wonderful in that series, behind the scenes series, whether that was something he can manage every week, those performances, those very inventive team talks, brilliant, absolutely brilliant. So if he's still working at that level, then he should be allowed to keep working.
I think that the progress in the Champions League cannot be underestimated. I think
So you're speaking up for him?
Yeah, I think it's brilliant. But I'm not going to speak about Arteta. I don't think Arteta is an issue. They'd be absolutely ridiculous to switch Arteta. I think recruitment's an issue. And I think with Arsenal, the recruitment, I mean, Saliba, Gabriel, Raya, some of the recruitment has been absolutely fantastic. Martinelli, Trossard. But I think it began to go wrong when, I keep coming back to this, Granit Xhaka left the club. And Granit Xhaka left the club. Declan Rice had been signed.
You don't like Declan Rice by the sound of it. You always tell me he's not playing in the right position.
I adore Declan Rice, and I think you should be at Chelsea.
He's a great bloke. We both agree with that. Yeah.
I adore Declan Rice, and for me, he was signed to replace Thomas Partey, who I think is a good player, but not a great player. And I thought that at Atletico Madrid, and I've not changed my mind. And I think that Kai Havertz was signed to play in midfield and replace Granit Xhaka. And that is how Arsenal lined up after Xhaka had left, with Gabriel Jesus at centre forward. But Jesus has never been fit enough and has never scored the goals. And Havertz wasn't really the answer in midfield. And having watched Havertz for years, I don't know what his best position is, but I think it's always somewhere else from where he's selected. And with Jesus struggling, it finished up with Havertz going to centre forward, where he wasn't quite good enough at Chelsea over the years, which is why the decision, I think, was taken to sell him. Rice was moved to replace Xhaka as the number 8, box to box, where I don't think he's quite as effective as he is as the holding midfielder, and Partey was brought back into the team. And I just don't think it's quite worked out at the level at which it was. And I think they need a centre-forward who's fit and will get goals and who likes being in the penalty area. And I think they need a number 8.
The sporting director who recruited these players is no longer at the club.
He isn't. Dedu's gone. Yeah.
So maybe there'll be a difference.
Yeah. I think
you've got to mention the throughput from their own. I mean, Waneri, Saka, obviously, Miles Lewis-Skelly.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, he's been
absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
Absolutely brilliant. Yeah.
So that's another element that Arteta can take credit for, because he's giving them game time for these young players.
Yeah. I've got nothing against Arteta except the miserable bastard keeps beating Chelsea. That's my only problem with him. But I think Arsenal have just lost their balance. That's all. And I think recruitment is required to get it back. I think that's their biggest problem. Okay, we've talked about what we need to talk about, so we'll go on to 3 of the best.
And he makes them pay.
3 of the best. He's made them pay, and that completes a wonderful hat-trick.
3 of the best. Young player, old player, young player.
Yeah, I mean, I saw him play actually about a month ago. Jeremy Monga of Leicester City,
who I've never heard of.
No, he became the second youngest player to play in the Premier League. Ethan Nwaneri, I've just mentioned, he was second youngest to him. 15 years and 271 days, 15 and 181 for Nwaneri for the record, when he made his debut. He's a winger, but he can play. I mean, there's a lot of stuff about his very young years. You know, he played as a 10, but he's playing as a substitute in Leicester's team as a winger. Still at college. They have to work a program to get him his football training and of course his education as well. I don't think he can sign a pro contract until he's 17. If you remember, he had to wear a blank shirt. Well, you won't remember because you've never heard of him, but he had to wear a blank shirt on his debut because they have a cryptocurrency sponsor, Leicester, and at his age he's not allowed to be advertising that kind of thing. And
that's healthy, isn't it? That you can have a different shirt because I think that's healthy.
I think there's something else. I don't know this, but
how is he?
15. Yeah, he would have to change in a different changing room.
I don't think they should have a mobile phone. Well, not a smartphone, anyway.
But the safeguarding issues apply to him. When I was at Woking, we had a 16-year-old and Jaden Wareham played in our team, and he had to change in another part of the ground.
Really?
Yeah. I know it's the right thing to do, and football's moved forward in that respect in recent years. I just think he's the thing that alerted me to him, and I'll be truthful. I went to this game, which was Leicester against Newcastle. He wasn't in my notes. and then I walked round the ground from the gantries on the other side to the changing rooms, and I've got pally over the years with the ground staff at Leicester, and we stopped for our usual chat by the corner flag on the gantry side, and then one of them said, "I just wish he'd give Monga a go." I went, "Pardon?" And then I got up to the gantry and I started to do a bit of work, and there he was on the team sheet, so as a substitute, and that's the way he will be for a while.
Do you remember his number?
93, I think. Yeah, I think is it 93? Michael will look it up over there. It's certainly in the 90s anyway.
Yeah.
And he came on. That was his debut night. He's obviously got something about him. The crowd love him. The crowd knew all about him. But I hope that with the publicity he gets, that he's still protected. He's not jumped on by the media because he is so young. Nwaneri's been well looked after by Arsenal.
This is really interesting because nowadays, as soon as you kick a ball or look as though you might be kicking a ball in the near future, you're interviewed. If you go back to the early 1990s, when a young Ryan Giggs was allowed into the Manchester United team by an already grumpy old Sir Alex, he was still Alex then, not Sir Alex. Yeah. He wouldn't let him do any interviews at all for ages in order to keep his feet on the ground, but not just that, in order to let him focus on what he needed to focus on. I think, and what good management that was.
It was, but I think times have moved on now. Kids are on phones all the time. They're doing their own videos. There's a much greater awareness of public speaking, really, and I think they benefit from it. Usually, if the player is very shy, then you don't get him to come on, and you don't want him to come on. But if the club feel that there's some advantage for the player and for themselves, I guess, then a press officer will come with him, and it's not live, so you can stop at any point. But I've many time down the years say, do you think we can do an interview rather than, come on, here's the story of the day, we need him out here. I'm pretty sure that would be the same with television in the mainstream broadcast channels in this country today. So I haven't seen him interviewed. Maybe if we go onto the Leicester City website, we might find something, but I doubt it. But he is very, very young. And Harry now is, is making great strides, and I hope Jeremy goes the same way.
My 3 players all are Newcastle United players, and I'll let you into a secret. We're recording this on a Monday, and I've just driven down from Newcastle from the weekend.
It's quite a difficult journey, as you're about to find out later on.
Yeah. So my young players is Lewis Miley. 2 seasons ago, in I think the last month of the season, Lewis Miley made his Newcastle debut at Stamford Bridge in a 1-1 draw, and he came on with only about 3 minutes to go. He was just turned 17. He was about 10'12". He was as much a man-looking person as anyone on the pitch. And within minutes of coming on, he had smacked a shot against the crossbar. The following season, last season, at St James's Park, he started the game against Chelsea, a 4-1 victory for Newcastle. And he made the first goal with a wonderful threaded pass through the penalty area. The ball fell to him just outside, rather fortuitously. I think it was a poor touch by Joe Linton, and the ball fell to him, and he threaded it through first touch for Isak, who scored in a 4-1 victory. His debut, he was the youngest Newcastle player to appear in the Premier League. His assist, he was the youngest Newcastle player to get an official assist. It's not been straightforward for him since. He's not probably played as much as he would like. This weekend against Chelsea, he came on in the second half, quite early in the second half, to an absolutely fantastic ovation from the St James's crowd. He's still only 19, and I think he has got a massive future ahead of him. I think he looks as though he belongs to a team that plays in front of 52,000 every week. He looks the part, and he's huge. He's a little bit like Jude Bellingham in his on-pitch persona. Lewis Miley, it's not been a straight road for him, but I think it's been a road that is going in the right direction.
I have to compliment you, Neil, because we talked about Reggie Walsh last week, and he played the whole game for Chelsea, having been a few minutes sub when we were talking about him.
He had a very good first half.
Maybe your recommendation fell on the ears of Enzo Maresca, who also was recommended in that particular show.
But he ran out of legs in the second half, but he had a really good first half. Lovely. Old player.
Yes, he's a current player, but he's elderly, I suppose. So
34?
34 years. Danny Welbeck, who for the first time, remember his first Premier League season was 2008, 2009, and he's been an England striker in that period as well. That he finally got to 10 Premier League goals in a season. He'd been on 9 on a couple of occasions in his time with Manchester United. And he continues to offer more than just goals, but with a striker's mentality, that will mean a huge amount to him to get to double figures in a top division season. I don't quite know. Obviously, he's had injuries in the period of Man United for many years, Arsenal, Watford for a brief period, and now Brighton. And he's done it with Brighton, and he plays with a smile. He's much admired in the game, much liked.
He's got better.
Well, I think sometimes that can happen. Chris Wood, we've talked about a lot in this programme, is only a year younger, who got to 20 goals.
Yeah, I mean,
which is fabulous for him as well.
I do remember in 2016 when José Mourinho became Manchester United manager. In his first interview, he said, "I would never have let certain players leave," and Danny Welbeck was one of them. How can you let Welbeck leave?
He had a very good England career.
I first saw Welbeck play in the Manchester United youth team in about January 2009. So when he got into the first team, was still of youth team age. And he looked a real player. He played up front with the guy's name, I can never remember, the Italian guy, Federico...
Makeda?
Makeda, that's it.
You can do better than
that. But I think they both scored for United.
There's a big well done, Danny boy.
Yeah,
well done.
Lovely. My old player is Eddie Howe. I'm beginning to fall in love with Eddie Howe, reluctantly, of course, because of his affiliations. But what Eddie Howe did at the weekend with Newcastle really impressed me. First of all, he played everyone in a position that they could understand, which is something I've not seen for a while at my club. And everyone had this fantastic intensity to their game. But he made a mistake. And he took off Botman, who's not played a lot and maybe needed to come off physically. And he put on Miley, but he took off a defender and put on a midfielder. And at that point, for the only time in the game, Chelsea got a little bit of joy. And it was up the left flank where Botman had been playing, where Botman had left a hole anyway by coming on.
He started with 3 at the back, so he just went to 2 centre-halves. And
I didn't see who went to right back. But what happened was Cucurella and Neto were causing a problem. So he quickly took someone off and put Kraft, who is a right back.
Well, that's who played at right back.
He
didn't have a right back. Jacob Murphy played as a right wing back.
Yeah, but he put Kraft on.
Livramento played as a left wing back.
But he hadn't put him on for Botman. But he saw the error and he corrected it, and that was the end of the issue. I have issues with Kraft because he's got too many T's in his name, and I never know how to pronounce it. But Kraf. TH.
Is it?
Yeah. It always confuses me. I think it should be Kraft, but it's obviously Kraft. And it got me thinking about Eddie Howe, the player, because we've all followed him for so long as he came up the leagues with Bournemouth and then went to Burnley and didn't make it, and came back to Bournemouth and came up the leagues further and thrived in the Premier League and then got relegated and left and took a lot of time out and finished up in the right job at Newcastle. I think he's done a brilliant job at Newcastle.
His playing career was affected badly by injury, wasn't it?
Yeah, he played for Bournemouth, did quite well, went to Portsmouth and got injured in his first game, and basically was out for 2 years. I think he came back for the first game the following season and was out for another year and more, and went back to Bournemouth and had a few years, but gave up at 26. I was surprised that he was a defender, because he doesn't look like a defender. He looks like a midfielder to me, is it bodily? Did you ever see him play? No.
I might have the odd game, but not in a memorable sort of way. But I've seen him manage, and I've watched him manage, and the development and the way he puts himself wholeheartedly. I guess that applies to so many managers, but Eddie is literally the first one in and the last one to leave, week after week, day after day, and you get your reward. If you go out in life, whatever you're trying to do, you can be the most determined, and he's certainly got a real streak of that in him.
Yeah,
and
with a baby face and a nice
smile.
Well,
that does.
Yeah. But I mean, he's come in.
He's got Jason Tyndall to look after him in the dugout, hasn't he?
But he's come in with this undistinguished playing career, and he hasn't come in with a philosophy other than improve players by playing them in their best positions and getting the best out of the players and the best out of the best players. And he seems to have really not wavered from that, and therefore he's got an open mind as to what's best to do. It's not you have to play this one way or this other way. You just have to play in a way that is.
I do think it's one of the few benefits from having a playing career that's ruined by injury, that you do, if you're into coaching, you do get that experience when you're much younger, and he's put that to really good use. And maybe a bit more now that we get the truly elite players in management. But the long period, people say, oh, well, if you're so good, you can't teach the other players to be what is natural to you. That being the best player on the training ground when you're actually the manager of the club is not necessarily an advantage.
No. Where do you stand? Just one more thing on Eddie Howe. Where do you stand on his tightest tracksuit trousers in the Premier League? Because he fancies his own legs, doesn't he?
I think he's the most modest man, and I am sure that's totally untrue. I've never noticed it. It's not the sort of thing I look at, Neil, and I'm starting to worry about you.
Nothing to worry about.
Sartorially, I am not an expert, and as everybody who knows me knows. So I plead no comment to that.
Your player.
Yeah, it's about time we did this. It's really about time this. Harry Kane, who has been, that phrase you use, he's got to win something. Well, he has won something. And all people are talking about is how long he's taken to do it. But it's not been his shortcomings that he hasn't won trophies before. It's just a magnificent career, just a forward of power when necessary, all the traditional elements of, if you like, an old-style centre-forward, with the subtlety to add as well, the touch to add, the ability to find a pass to set up goals for other people. But he's still got that massive hunger for goals. I mean, 71 England goals, it's just an extraordinary effort. What is it, just over 100 caps. Pretty much a goal a game in the Bundesliga in his 2 seasons there, which is Roy the Rover stuff, that sort of thing. Doesn't really happen since the days of Dixie Dean and maybe early Haaland, I suppose. But Harry's been doing it year after year after
Ronaldo,
year. Yeah, Messi and Ronaldo, of course. But this is, I was so pleased for him, just as a football lover. I've met him a few times. He's always good to talk to, always happy to stop and have a chat. I just think we probably just take him for granted, and we shouldn't, because it's a special career. It's not over yet. And in a way, it's just taken one little bit of the pressure off. I don't know how he felt about not winning and not having silverware. I guess from the way he held up the Bundesliga trophy, there was a little bit of at last about it. And of course, he's had to deal with everybody saying to him at last. But as somebody who tried to score goals when I was much, much younger, I know how difficult it is. And the rate that he scored goals is absolutely extraordinary. His appetite's never dulled. He's played with injuries. We know he didn't have the best Euros. He didn't have the best Champions League final when Tottenham got there. But he's still out there doing it, trying to score, trying to win. And now he's got something on his CV. If you look at his Wikipedia page, there's not much on the honours, but unless you look down the individual honours, and it goes on forever with the individual awards that he's had because he's such a fine player.
Also, he is a Tottenham boy. And I saw an interview with Alan Shearer where he was asked if he regretted going to Newcastle because he never won anything, but going to the club of his heart. And he said, no way. He'd won his league, and it was, for him, it was just the most fantastic time. I think Harry Kane probably left Tottenham reluctantly because it was his club. I think if Tottenham had won something, I wouldn't be at all surprised if he'd have stayed. But he had to leave to win something. And if he ever goes back there, I hope he doesn't win anything ever again. But it was it'll be ironic if Tottenham win the Europa League now without him.
Well, they've got a 50-50 chance,
exactly.
I would say.
Can you have a final in which both clubs have got a 20-20 chance because they're so crap? Is that possible?
It is extraordinary, as we're speaking, that they are the 2 teams above the relegation line in the Premier League, and they are such famous clubs.
But every manager you speak to says, and when you work inside the game as we have, you understand it. You don't set out the season with targets. You set out to do the best you can, but you may well form targets as the season goes on, depending on where you stand and what you're doing. And I do think in the last couple of months, both teams have targeted the Europa League and said we're not going down, and all our priorities are in the Europa League. And
it'd be the most extraordinary final. There's so many different layers of it. The histories of the clubs, the positions of obviously they find themselves in, what they mean for the future of the clubs, the players involved. Is going to be massive clear out at either club, both clubs maybe. I can't wait for it, to be honest. And the people are saying, well, it's the 2 clubs that shouldn't get a Champions League place for winning. Obviously, one of them will, and I support that.
Oh, so do I. Absolutely. Yeah. I saw a tweet, an ex, which made me giggle actually this week. That said,
one of your exes,
that said the 3 worst managers in the Premier League have kept their jobs because they got to European finals. And that's harsh.
It's harsh,
but it is humorous. My player this week, Sandro Tonali. I remember a game in around 2000 between Italy under 21s and England under 21s. And the Italy number 10, they must have played 4-4-1-1 or 4-2-3-1. I think it was 4-4-1-1. The Italy number 10 ran the game and destroyed England. His name was Andrea Pirlo. And about 2 years later, his club manager, Carlo Ancelotti, decided to take him out of that number 10 role and put him at the base of midfield and become the playmaker. And within a very short period, he became the best playmaker in the world. And of course, Milan won the 2003 and the 2007 Champions League finals, and Italy won the 2006 World Cup. And he went on to Juventus and played in the Champions League final with Juventus when Italian football really had gone rather down the hole, and he was in at the start of their domination of Serie A. Sandro Tonali, I first saw playing number 10 for Milan, and really pushing on. A bit like Pirlo, he's not got a lot of pace, but he can get around the pitch, and he can get around the pitch for 90 minutes. And good player. Good player, not a great player, but a good player, really good player with a good eye and good ability. And out of nowhere this season, Eddie Howe switched in with Bruno Guimaraes and put him at the base of midfield. And it's got Newcastle, I think, playing better football. Guimaraes is a dog and a hard man and has a lot going for him. But I think Tonali is slightly the greater talent, if you like. I think it's transformed. He's only about 24, 25 now, isn't he, Tonali? He's done a Pirlo. If he grew a beard, he wouldn't look so different from him either, with the same bouffant hair. But I think he is... we were having a bit of a talk and a laugh about we ought to do at the end of the season the most improved 11 individually in the Premier League. Tonali might be captain. He has been. I mean, obviously last season he didn't play because of the gambling ban, which must have affected him psychologically, and all the processes he must have gone through to try and kick the habit. But this guy is a thinking footballer, and he's an absolute first degree thinking footballer.
It was interesting that the first goal, it could have been Bruno Guimaraes, it could have been, and it was Tonali. Both midfield players get into a position where midfield players have to have an instinct for goal to get into those positions, and either of them could have scored. And of course, Bruno did score the second from much further out, but
with the aid of a deflection, he was a little lucky. But
yeah, he was interviewed afterwards, and I think it was Guy Mowbray said that big deflection, and he went, "No, just a little one," which I thought was a fair response.
Tonali is a player, and he was a good player for Milan, a good player for Italy. But he's become a great player for Newcastle. Yeah. I hate him. It is time for... I don't hate him, really. I don't hate anybody, except Leeds. It is time for Letter from the Gantry with Martin Tyler.
Letter from the Gantry.
Actually, I want to say beforehand, I had this idea before I knew Neil was going to talk all about Newcastle United. So it's a story that involves Newcastle and Chelsea and the journey. And Neil's fact that he does it. What he hasn't told you today is he stops at every farm shop between Newcastle and London.
I'll give you a guide in a minute.
And that's why the podcast is a bit later on parade than it might otherwise have been. But this is a story about that particular journey.
But the cool box in my car is full of the most wonderful food.
It's about the only thing that's cool about you. Chelsea's recent trip to Newcastle brought back a memory from that gantry which I thought you might enjoy, involving José Mourinho, whose very name usually creates immediate interest. In December 2014, Sky Sports were covering Mourinho's team at St James's Park, a 5:30 kickoff on a Saturday evening, with yours truly doing the commentary. With my responsibilities not finishing until around 8 p.m, I would need an overnight stay. But then I found out that Chelsea had put on a plane for the players and staff for a return home as soon as possible after the game. Well, for 35 years, I've lived in the same village in Surrey, and Chelsea moved their training base into the neighbourhood 20 years ago. You can guess what's coming. Would there be a spare seat on the plane, I wondered. I asked Chelsea's head of communications, Steve Atkins, the question, very tentatively, I must say, before the game. I will have to check with José, he understandably replied. Just before the kickoff, I got the answer. The great man had said, OK. On the field, it didn't go smoothly for Chelsea, who were actually on their way to winning the Premier League title that season. They lost 2-1. It was their first defeat of the campaign. And the rest of the evening did not go according to plan either. We all arrived at the airport to be told there would be no flight. Perversely, the weather up in the northeast was fine, but in the southeast, fog had set in and was not expected to lift that night. Gatwick Airport, our target, had shut down. If we got airborne, it would probably mean a diversion to Manchester, not much help. Chelsea had a Champions League game in the following midweek, so getting back as soon as possible was a priority. So the coach which had brought the squad to the airport was reassigned to head for Surrey. I probably should have disappeared into the Newcastle night saying, "Thank you for thinking of me. One extra person surely couldn't fit into this hastily rearranged scenario. A 5 or even 6 hour journey ahead, and space was precious." I was filling up some of that. However, it appeared that despite a seemingly full bus, there was still room for me for the long haul. There was an extra seat near the driver. Gary Staker, then the football liaison officer and previously an interpreter for Claudio Ranieri, he looked after me brilliantly. The drama hadn't finished though. It soon became apparent that the driver would have to take a break at some point on our long trip south, under the regulations regarding hours at the wheel. Chelsea needed a tactical masterstroke. Whether it was José himself, I never found out, but it had the strategic stamp of a special one. The plan was for the coach company to send another vehicle with a fresh driver to an M1 service station in the East Midlands. Then there would be an immediate switch for José and his squad, like baton changes in a relay race. The rest of us would wait on the original coach while our driver obeyed the rules and had his rest. It worked perfectly. The new bus was waiting. The players and José and his staff decamped and reboarded. In its own way, one of the best Chelsea transfers ever. We too came out of it quite well. From a jam-packed squeeze of a journey, a handful of us now had the original bus to ourselves. We took over the area vacated by the players on the upper deck, stretching out, coffee on tap. Somehow, too, we had acquired a new driver and soon realised he was doing his very best to make up for lost time, or maybe was simply enjoying chasing the player's coach. He cut the deficit impressively. When we finally got close to the Cobham complex, we were passed by some of the players who just collected their cars and were driving home the very last leg of their long journey. They clearly hadn't been back for long. Gary Staker then picked up his car and well into the small hours very kindly dropped me at my house. Now, my original schedule for an overnight stay in Newcastle would have been, I think, far more relaxing, but definitely nowhere near as much fun.
Yeah. My journey back was much more fun, though. Yeah.
Yes. Well, I don't think you'd have loved it with the players.
Well, I've done that quite a few times.
You've done that millions of times.
Yeah, but I
actually they were asleep.
Yeah, well, it would be. Yeah. I love Newcastle as a city.
Yeah, I think we all do.
I went out on Saturday because it was a midday kickoff. I had a wonderful steak and kidney pudding dinner with a fine pint of beer. After the game, before the game, I went down Newcastle Market on the Quays, bought some socks, had a sausage sandwich, wonderful breakfast, and bought some CDs.
What are the quality of the socks in Newcastle?
Oh, excellent.
Are they known for that?
Bamboo socks, and bought one or two other
you
little
live
trinkets.
And learn when you work with Neil Barnett,
and then,
I tell you.
I went for some tapas. There's a really good Spanish restaurant just off the Quays. And then coming back today, the reason I was so late was I stopped in Minskip, which is near Wetherby.
Not Minsk.
on the A1, and went to Yoke Farm there and bought my eggs and things.
Not
like
Yokohama.
That. No, and then I stopped in Wakefield at Blacker Hall Farm Shop and bought some stuff there. I stopped at Leicester Sainsbury's, which is right next to the M1, as you know. Filled up £1.29 a litre petrol and got whatever normal things you need from Sainsbury's. And then I stopped at Manor Farm Shop in Catthorpe in Leicestershire for my final shopping.
You've just done the sponsorship then.
Yeah, brilliant. So that, it's a long
How much
trip.
percentage do you get off for doing it on the Joy of Football?
Not enough, not anything. It's about time I did. Right. Letter from the Gantry, Martin Tyne. Remember, you can read Letter from the Gantry as well on our Substack site, substack.com, where it's still called The Joy of Football as well. Martin's letters and my various prejudices.
Have we got time to talk a little bit more about Newcastle v Chelsea, or how are we doing, boys? What do you think? I just wonder, Neil remembers it, that the film Goal, which I ended up having a small part in, playing myself incidentally, no Hollywood stuff. Newcastle played Chelsea in the FA Cup in 2005 in February, so fourth round, yeah. And at the end of the game,
fifth round actually, fifth round.
Yeah,
just before the week before the League Cup final.
Yeah. Well, at the end of the game, we were told, and the fans weren't told in the stadium, I guess the players would have been told, that at the final whistle, the actors from the film Goal, it's a Newcastle story if you've watched the film, the actors playing the parts of Laurent Robert and Alan Shearer and things like that in the fictional account of it, would come on at the final whistle. Now, they didn't have any idea what scene it would be, whether it would be a celebration or not, but Newcastle won the game. And so these actors, so our cameras, the Sky cameras, had to not focus on the actors. And of course, the movie cameras, which were alongside, had to focus on the actors. So it was an extraordinary ending to the game where, and it was a very eventful game, wasn't it?
Carlo Codicini was in goal and got sent off and missed the League Cup final.
Yeah.
So Petr Cech played, and Wayne Bridge broke his leg.
Yeah.
And William Gallas played left back for the rest of the season.
And I ended up going back about a month later to commentate on this fictional game, of which the shots that we'd seen from the end of a real game were interwoven very skillfully, much more skillfully than my contribution. But it was fun. It's another reason to think warmly about Newcastle as a place. You know, it was a really happy time.
And you could have gone for steak and kidney pudding and tapas if you
No,
wanted.
I wouldn't have looked as slim and trim as I did in the film. I wish.
We move on to Voice of Passion.
Voice of Passion.
And of course, the voice of reason from Martin. In my years on American radio, at the beginning with the former Italy, Roma, Lazio, wash my mouth out. Italy, Lazio, and New York Cosmos centre forward Giorgio Canalia.
Swansea?
Yeah, I think he only played a couple of games for them, but yes, his first club, Swansea.
Yeah.
Giorgio had a phrase which he used, which became like a repeated phrase throughout the 13 years that I was on the radio, which was, "It's the money, you moron." And he said that to everyone. Whenever anyone said, "I don't understand why football's doing this," "It's the money, you moron." Well, Sir Jim Ratcliffe, or whoever, has decided that Manchester United staff are not going to get free tickets to the Europa League final. For people who haven't worked in football, it is a tradition that the staff get tickets to cup finals. This is a break with tradition. And it's not happened from the venture capitalist American owners. It's happened from the geezer from Monaco who grew up in Manchester, a Manchester United supporter. Why has he done it? It's the money, you moron. Now, Liverpool won the league 2 or 3 weeks ago, and their first game after that was at Stamford Bridge, and Chelsea beat them 3-1. And I always stay in my seat until the very, very end. I've never left a game early. You can't, because you're a commentator.
But I don't believe in it, even when I'm just...
But I've never left a game before the end, and I wait for the players to walk round and walk off the pitch, and then I leave. And my seat's fairly near the centre line, and I walk along the stand to the end, so I don't have to go through the along the tunnel, and I don't hit the crowds until I go down from the end exit. And when I walked along after the Chelsea-Liverpool game, there were only overseas people there, taking photographs of themselves, clearly on one-off basis there, not fans of either side particularly. I've got nothing against them as people being there. I have got something against so many being there, and clearly their income being preferred to legacy supporters, if you want to call them that. And it was a real shock to me how many. Otherwise, I wouldn't be talking about it. It was lots. Now, that was followed by a Europa Conference semi-final second leg against the Swedish side, whose name even escapes me now,
Djurgården.
Djurgården, that's it, Djurgården, who had never been to a European semi-final in their history, and whose previous European quarter-final was 69 years ago, small Stockholm club. And they brought tons of supporters. And the supporters got into all the home areas. These are pre-sold tickets, and they were in blocks in all the areas. Now, both Chelsea and UEFA are doing an investigation into how this happened. I'll tell you how it happened. The game wasn't going to sell out. It was sold on to some agency. One wonders, with a part owner of Chelsea having his own, having big shares in a ticket agency, which one? But they were sold on to various agencies, and the agency sold them on to the Djurgården fans because they were in blocks in the home, what is considered the home end. There was very little trouble because they were brilliant. The Djurgården supporters were absolutely superb. But why did it happen? It's the money, you moron. And if your first stimulation, your first target, your first thinking is the money, in football, you'll get it wrong. Because the first thinking, the first target has got to be victory, triumph. The original great phrase by Danny Blanchflower, who was the captain of Tottenham when they won the League and Cup double in 1961, it's not about winning, it's about glory. And that is what football's about. And if you go away from there and it's about profit, you will muck up.
I'm not going to voice of reason against this. I mean, the truth is, it is always about the money. I do believe...
You've got to have a budget.
No, but I do believe it has always been about the money, and it's just been different levels of money. And if your outgoings are massive, the need for money is even greater. And that's the position that these big club owners find themselves in. Now, whether they've created that or whether they've inherited a situation that was created before then, it's the way the world has gone. And if you're not at the top table, then you're nowhere. That's what I don't agree with that, but I think that's the perception in the world. I'm a big pyramid fan. You know, I love watching teams in different divisions. As you know, I'm still connected with Woking in a small way. But the pressure to pay the bills, and now with some financial constraints, which maybe are one of the reasons why Sir Jim is finding it a bit more difficult than possibly if he'd taken over 10 years ago. It would have been easier to put his stamp on and put his money where he wants to put it. But the financial fair play and profit and sustainability say you can only do so much of that. So then the whole balance sheet looks different. I'm not defending him at all. It's a decision. How many people it involved, goodness knows. What had previously been agreed, I don't know. Not in contracts, but the precedents must have been there before. I just think getting to a final is very special, and you're all in it together. And if you're part of a football club, you should be all in it together. And if you're making demarcations saying, well, they're only a tiny part of the football club, I'm not sure that's the right thing to do. No, I think it's all for one for all. That's what works in life and in sport.
Spot on. Right. There you go. Full time, stoppage time.
Stoppage time.
I'm just giving a little bit of time to stoppage time this week because we're going to talk about 3 clubs.
And we're going to talk about something else as well that I told you about this morning, but it's not on your running order.
Go
on. Serious foul play and VAR.
Yes, I think that Nicholas Jackson's red card was correct, and you don't.
Well, I feel for him. Russell Martin. I'm sound like I'm copying what Russell said, and it's very good. It was nice to see him on Match of the Day. That I thought that he was looking. Listen, I played up front. Well, 2 years ago, I suppose I last played. But you can be looking like that to protect yourself, and then it took it into Sven Botman, and I do think my point is that the on-field referee should make the decision because the replays, even at normal speed, the replays do look more damning than they're actually. That's not to say that can't be the case, that it needs looking at. I was amazed that the Tyrone Mings one, Villa playing at Bournemouth, wasn't. So it would have been assessed, but it wasn't upgraded from a yellow to a red, and he got the benefit of the doubt. Strangely enough, I was at the Fulham game where Darren England, who was the VAR man on the Jackson incident, where he stood his ground. It was the last seconds of the game, and the penalty, he hadn't awarded it. He'd awarded a corner. And then the VAR said, no, we think it's handball. And he went over, and it was probably the easiest time to stand firm. But he did stand firm. And he said, no, I'm going to stick with my original decision. I can only remember Graham Scott doing that once for Spurs, in a game, not for Spurs, but in a game at Spurs, I think at home to Brighton, where he said, no, I'm not listening to them. Well, I'm listening to them, but I'm going to stick by what I did. So that maybe one or two others, very, very rare to happen, as David Moyes, who was the beneficial manager, pointed out. So I thought, oh, God, well done, Darren. I thought that was very good. But I think he's fallen into the trap. The same with Evan Nielsen, the same with Zabani, where they got yellow cards upgraded to red, both Bournemouth players. The Evan Nielsen one was overturned, rescinded. This one won't be because there's enough doubt in it. But I just think that if you look at the two, as Russell Martin, I agree with him. I'm perhaps copying him as well. Of the two, Mings was the more likely to be sent off. I'm not saying he necessarily should have been, but that was more of a threatening foul. That was more of a. It seemed more of a movement of the arm. That Jackson was maybe just raising his arm, not to smash him, Botman, but to protect himself. But we're going to disagree. So that's fair enough. And I'm sure many of you will disagree as well. But I do think only the on-field referee should judge serious foul play because he gets the moment, the speed, the aggression. And if he sees it as a yellow card, then the VAR shouldn't bother to intervene, unless it's an assassination, which of course it could be sometimes. End of. That's my stoppage time. You've got yours now.
Okay. PSG and Barcelona haven't made the final, but what a Champions League they've had. Barcelona, in case people haven't noticed, won the UEFA Youth League at the end of last month. It's a fantastic tournament, the UEFA Youth League, and it's got better. It started off as just a shadow of the senior competition with the same teams, but now the champions of each nation's youth leagues go into it as well. Even
if the first team isn't
yeah,
in it.
Yeah, and so it's really good. This was the third time that Barcelona won it. The first year was 2013-14, and they were the first winners. They beat Benfica 3-0. In 2017-18, they beat Chelsea 3-0, and this season they beat Trabzonspor 4-1. So Barcelona have now won it more times than anyone else. A couple of other teams have won it twice. Chelsea have won it twice. Actually, that's the only other team that's won it twice. Not even Real Madrid has. So their young players weren't involved in the Champions League. But if you look at their team against Inter Milan in the Champions League semi-final, Pau Kabassi, 18 years old, Pedri, 22, Lamine Yamal, 17, and then coming off the bench, Fermin Lopez, 22, Hector Fort, 18, and Gavi, 20. Absolutely remarkable. And then you look at Paris Saint-Germain against Arsenal. I'm looking at the second leg. Nuno Mendes, 22, João Neves, 20, Desiree Doué, 19, and Bradley Barcola, 22. I mean, these are young teams. These teams can go on for 10 years.
I'll give you a specific reason for each time. Barcelona can't register first-team players because of their financial commitment.
But they've been like this.
Yeah, but they, at the moment,
years,
so if you can't get people in and sign them, like Danny Olmo, for example, who's up and down, and he has been able to play, he hasn't been able to play, and things. So what do? You make sure you've got your kids good enough, but they do have a fantastic system, so their kids are good enough. But that's why they're in. You and I talk a bit about Chelsea not giving him enough minutes and everything. They don't need them. Barcelona need them. And they are very good, so it works perfectly. PSG have failed the Galactico approach, so desperate to. It would be very interesting to see whether they finally get their hands on the Holy Grail, which has been the ownership's main target since they took over the club. And they've gone now to saying, well, hang on, older players, that's not going to work. That hasn't worked, so let's do a different way. And they are. I mean, João Neves could have gone anywhere, really, and he chose to go. Obviously, Paris made him an offer he couldn't refuse. Barcola's done very well, particularly last season. And Doué's made great strides. Nuno Mendes is arguably one of the best left-backs in the world, isn't he? So it's great, but they're doing it because they've tried the other ways. They're not forced to do it. And I all credit them. We all love seeing young players. We talk a lot in this, don't we? The joy of football, seeing who's coming through, how they develop. And when they've developed so far, they come on the podcast.
Well,
I think that's my specific answer to your.
But the great thing about football is, it's something José Mourinho actually said to me once about getting people fit, about how you get them match fit, about how you put a team together. He said there is no truth. In other words, there is not one way. There are so many ways of doing it. Inter Milan's team in the semi-final included in goal Jan Sommer, 36 years old. In defence, Francesco Acerbi, who got his first ever European goal, aged 37. In midfield, Enrique Mkhitaryan, 36. Hakan Çalhanoğlu, 31. Matteo Darmian came on 35, and Stefan de Vrij, I think, in his 33, Stefan de Vrij. They are at the end of their career, and I just wonder with them whether either they run out of legs, which I don't think they will, or whether they say, this is our one chance to win it as a group. And I'm kind of favouring Inter Milan.
Historically, Italian clubs extend the years of active service for players, going back to the Bareses and people like that. They're playing in Maldini. They're playing well into their 30s. I think there's two things about it. I think they know how to get the best out of aging bodies, and I think they respect age and experience on a football field, which some countries don't. You reach a certain mark, and people. I remember being told by a Liverpool player. Told off by a Liverpool player that I'd mentioned it was his 32nd birthday. This is a long time ago, but he pulled me the next time he saw me. He said, "You said it was my birthday." I said, "Well, it was." And he said, "But you said it was the 32nd. I said, "It was." He said, "But you don't say that because that people don't know I'm 32." And therefore he was, so I got that. And we shook hands on it at the end, but it was something I've always been aware of, the way that professional sportsmen have to go from this 15-year-olds we've been talking down today, through years and years where they think, oh, well, this is great, this is going on forever. And then they reach that point where they realize it's not going to go on forever. Do they keep going? Will their bodies keep going? And Italian clubs have been very good at that. And this group, I think it was the oldest. I did the Bayern games, and I think I had a stat about
the quarterfinals.
Yes, yeah. And I think it was a stat the first time that over 35-year-olds had played 4 or 5, 35 and overs in a Champions League quarterfinal, which is amazing. And look where they are; they're in the final now. So, and good luck to them.
Can I just, before we finish, talk about one player who doesn't get into that list because he's only 29? Dumfries, right wing back for Inter Milan. When he left the Netherlands, he wasn't young. I think he was 25, and I remember saying, "Well, obviously he's not good enough because he'd have been discovered before now, and you got to get out of the Netherlands at 22 or whatever if you're going to make it big." But he had a very good Euros. He then had a very good World Cup. And we talked about Hakimi quite a lot recently at PSG. I think, and we've talked about Trent and all the other right backs that England have had, great right backs in recent times. I think the two best right backs in the world are going to play in this Champions League final.
I have to ask you this. Did he play in the semi? He didn't play in the quarterfinals. He was injured.
Yeah.
Did he play in the semi-final?
Yeah.
He did.
Yeah.
I'm good for him,
But he is a fantastic player. It's thrilling. It's absolutely thrilling.
That's a system that allows the right back to go down the outside, and you should start following them because you like that.
Yeah,
and your club's not doing it.
I know. Yeah. Brilliant. Brilliant player.
Yeah.
And somehow his career's gone in the right direction all the way through. And
that's down the outside.
Yeah. Right. That's it. Please remember that if you've enjoyed it, subscribe, and don't forget, of course, all the other things that you can do. Follow us on the Patreon and read us on substack.com, The Joy of Football. From Martin and me, we'll be back next week.
Hope so.
Right. Thanks for listening, watching. Don't forget all those things. I've just been through them, subscribe, etc. I'm just so angry with myself as I was sitting here talking with you, Martin. I'm so angry with myself that I realised while I was sitting there stuffing my face full of steak and kidney pudding and my lovely pint of beer, I didn't take a photograph of it. So it'll be hard for me to write it up on substack.com because I haven't got any photographs. But it's great.
The joy of catering will follow shortly.